On June 14th, 1969, 6-year-old Dennis Martin went with his father, grandfather, and 9-year-old brother on their traditional Father's Day outing to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. At an area of the park called Spence Field along the Appalachian Trail, Dennis and his brother decided to play a game of hide and seek. But the Martins weren't alone. Soon enough, they were joined by another family whose last name, coincidentally, was also Martin. Dennis and his brother invited the other Martin children to play their game of hide and seek. The kids all went to hide, meaning to jump out and scare the adults as a prank. The adults sat on the grass, wise to what the children were doing, but they smiled and humored them nonetheless. Dennis, wearing a red shirt that day, was told by the other children to hide somewhere farther away as to be less conspicuous. Nonetheless, Dennis's father could clearly see him going to hide behind a distant bush. The kids all jumped out to scare the adults, save for Dennis. At first, everyone thought he'd missed his cue, but soon enough it became apparent that Dennis had inexplicably vanished. Mr. Martin, panicked, sprinted down the Appalachian Trail for 2 miles, but failed to locate his son. He instructed the other Mr. Martin to seek the help of park rangers. As the afternoon wore on into evening, the area was hit with a horrible rainstorm. The wet weather would hamper the search efforts subsequent to Dennis's disappearance. About 5 miles below the spot where Dennis vanished, in an area of the Cades Cove Valley called Rowan's Creek, another family was hiking, the Keys. The Keys were hoping to see some bears, and they spotted something peculiar either during the Martin kids' hide-and-seek game or else shortly after Dennis's disappearance. They reported hearing, quote, an enormous, sickening scream, and witnessed what looked like a bear running through the bushes, although it seemed to be not a bear at all upon closer inspection, but rather a large, hairy, rough-looking man. He had something, they said, slung over his shoulder, and acted as if he was trying to hide. Soon after the Keys returned home, Harold Key, the father, saw a newspaper report of Dennis's disappearance and learned the FBI had an agent monitoring the case. Mr. Key called the FBI, intending to show the agent the exact area of the park where he and his family saw the strange, hairy man. However, the agent instructed Key to meet him and a park ranger outside the park at a separate location. Now, Mr. Martin had an agreement with the FBI and Park Service stipulating he'd receive every bit of information about their search for his son. But the Park Service and FBI kept secret their interview with the Key family. Word of the Key family's strange encounter with the hairy man got to Mr. Martin, however, after a reporter from the Knoxville Times, learning of the Key's story from law enforcement, confronted the FBI about it, tracked down the Key family, and reported everything to Mr. Martin. Mr. Martin was furious, demanding to know why the FBI didn't tell him about the Keys and the hairy man, but they claimed it was irrelevant to the case, that the distance between the bush where Dennis was hiding and the spot where the Keys saw the hairy man was far too far for the supposed hairy man to have anything to do with Dennis's disappearance. Dwight McCarter, a tracker for the Park Service, claimed the FBI were lying and walked the trail between Spence Field and Rowan's Creek with Mr. Martin to show it was possible that whomever the Keys saw could feasibly kidnap Dennis, as the walk only took roughly an hour or so. The Green Berets were sent in to search the park, but rejected the help of the Park Service and anyone who knew the park by heart, such as McCarter. They searched for a week. No one knew what exactly they were looking for other than Dennis. At this point, Mr. Martin was livid, feeling everyone was lying to him. He knew about the detail the press wouldn't report and the Park Service wouldn't talk about, that the hairy man reportedly had something slumped over his shoulder, something bright red, the same color as Dennis's shirt on the day that he disappeared. Now, the obvious answer to this case is that Dennis Martin was abducted. People like McCarter are convinced that this is indeed what happened. Why neither the FBI nor the Park Service will discuss this possibility, we might suspect, is because they know who or what kidnapped Dennis and don't want anyone else finding out who or what that is. After all, it is a bit strange that the Keys would mistake a man for a bear, unless the man was abnormally large and abnormally hairy. One answer is that it wasn't a man at all who kidnapped Dennis, but a creature like Bigfoot. Another, perhaps more disturbing explanation is that Dennis was kidnapped by some wild man wearing fur pelts, living off the grid and apart from human society. This is the theory McCarter personally subscribes to. What the person or creature wanted with Dennis is anyone's guess. It's also worth noting that some details of the story, such as the Martins meeting a family with their same last name, and the Key family being the literal key to solving the case, seem a little too coincidental, as if Dennis's family was involved in his disappearance somehow. However, this appears very unlikely. The Great Smoky Mountains National Park is highly valuable to the Knoxville community in terms of both its revenue and cultural significance. As such, it makes sense why the community wouldn't want to risk its reputation. Nonetheless, there have been many missing person cases involving the park, and while it's possible Dennis simply got lost and died of exposure or was killed by a bear or other animal, as the Park Service reasons, there might be something more to his disappearance, more than 50 years ago, that the park officials don't want seeing the light of day.